March 8th, 2023. A streaming service uploads 3 documentary episodes about a vanished airliner, timed to the 9th anniversary of the day it disappeared. Inside those episodes, one man argues 2 completely different explanations for the same disappearance. In the first hour, the pilot did it. In the second, Russian hijackers did. Neither argument has held up. Within days, the investigators who spent over a decade on this case are furious. And the director herself later admits, on the record, that she believes the plane is somewhere else entirely from what her own series just spent 2.5 hours dramatizing. Millions of people now believe things about MH370 that the people who actually spent years searching for it say are simply wrong. This is what they got wrong. And this is what the actual flight recorder math says happened in its final seconds. Math neither of our first 2 MH370 videos has fully shown you. You're watching Black Box Breakdown. MH370, fact-checking the Netflix documentary. Chapter 1, the documentary. March 8th, 2023. 9 years to the day after the disappearance, a 3-part documentary series drops all at once. MH370, the plane that disappeared. Each of the 3 episodes centers on one theory and one on-camera champion. Episode 1, the pilot did it. Episode 2, Russian hijackers did. Episode 3, the US military shot it down and covered it up. Critics were split right down the middle. Professional reviewers rated it generally favorable. Ordinary viewers, watching those same 3 episodes, rated it generally unfavorable. David Mearns, a marine scientist who has spent years hunting shipwrecks, including this one, was blunt about it. The series is dominated by 2 people spinning, in his words, ridiculous and unsupported conspiracy theories. Richard Godfrey, one of the most cited independent investigators on this case, went further. The series gives conspiracy, fabrication, and fantasy the same weight as hard evidence and short on hard facts and evidence. And here is the detail that undercuts the entire series more than any critic could. Its own director, Louise Malkinson, has said publicly that she believes the plane is most likely sitting in the southern Indian Ocean, the one outcome her own show barely dramatizes at all. To be fair, not every review was a takedown. The Wall Street Journal called it a series where every convincing argument is followed by an equally convincing demolition of it. Even harsher critics praised episode 1's minute-by-minute reconstruction of the disappearance itself. So before we grade its theories one by one, remember what its own director already told you. This is a show built to dramatize 3 explanations that even the person who made it doesn't fully believe. Chapter 2, the pilot. Episode 1 makes its case plainly. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, it argues, deliberately turned the plane, depressurized the cabin to incapacitate everyone else on board, and flew it by hand using saved waypoints into the emptiest ocean on Earth. One reviewer called the episode's extended reenactment of that moment stunningly irresponsible, warning it risked, in their words, irrevocable harm to a real family. Here is what the official Malaysian investigation actually found after checking his entire background. No psychiatric history, no financial distress, no marital trouble. No religious or political extremism, no change in his behavior that any colleague ever flagged, no stress detected in his own voice on the final air traffic recordings. His home flight simulator did contain a saved route running into the southern Indian Ocean, but the official report states plainly it could not be conclusively linked to the actual flight. The series also leaves out testimony describing him as lonely and estranged, testimony the official background check simply never corroborated. His own sister disagrees entirely. Sakina Ahmad Shah has spoken publicly more than once, including this year, calling the theory impossible. Calling it impossible and describing, in her own words, a very decent family. State this plainly, because it matters more than any theory in this video. The official investigation did not just fail to prove this theory, it affirmatively found nothing in the man's life that supports it. He cannot answer back. The evidence never convicted him either. Chapter 3, the hijack. Episode 2 drops the pilot theory entirely and argues something stranger. 3 passengers, it claims, entered the aircraft's forward electronics bay mid-flight and hijacked it electronically, diverting it north toward Kazakhstan. The stated motive: distracting the world from Russia's annexation of Crimea, happening at almost the exact same time. The theory's own author, journalist Jeff Wise, admitted even in his original piece that there was, in his words, no way to know and no plausible motive for an act with no apparent beneficiary. There's a timing problem too. By early 2014, Russia's move into Crimea was already succeeding. The distraction it supposedly needed didn't need creating. And Netflix's own on-camera interviewees rebut the theory directly. Fuad Sharuji, Malaysia Airlines' own former crisis director, calls a mid-flight takeover from that compartment impossible. Mark Dickinson, an Inmarsat vice president, also interviewed on camera, says the idea that a hijacker predicted the satellite company's own analysis method in advance doesn't seem particularly credible at all. Outside satellite specialists go further. Mike Exner states plainly the plane cannot be flown from that compartment and that the satellite data cannot be altered from there, as the theory claims. And journalist William Langawesh's own read of the physical evidence points the opposite way entirely. Control was seized from inside the actual cockpit in a 20-minute window, not remotely from a hidden compartment. And here is the twist even the documentary never saw coming. This January, Jeff Wise, the same man who originated this theory, posted a video titled, "Plainly, Why the Cockpit Theory Doesn't Add Up." He is now on the record, arguing against the very kind of deliberate pilot scenario Episode 1 spent an hour dramatizing. One man, 2 theories he authored himself for 2 different episodes of the same series, and by this year, he no longer stands fully behind either one. Chapter 4, The Intercept. Episode 3 goes furthest of all. It argues the aircraft carried roughly 2.5 tons of sensitive electronic cargo bound for China, and that American surveillance aircraft intercepted and jammed it before it was shot down over the South China Sea. In this version, the Indian Ocean debris was either planted or misidentified as part of a cover-up spanning multiple governments. Its lead voice is French journalist Florence de Changy, who calls the entire case aviation's biggest con. On camera, Ghislain Wattrelos, who lost his wife and 2 children on this flight, says an intelligence contact told him American surveillance planes know full well what happened. That is his own account. It has never been independently confirmed. Richard Godfrey's rebuttal, point by point. Malaysian radar was not falsified. The co-pilot's own phone was detected, pinging a cell tower near Penang at the exact time the series claims the plane had already been seized. And the recovered debris carries manufacturer part numbers and stencils that tie it directly to this exact aircraft. Malaysian military radar DID detect the aircraft's turn, contrary to the documentary's claim that it went unnoticed. It was logged as friendly and simply not pursued. A failure of protocol, not evidence of a cover-up. And the mysterious cargo the series frames as something smuggled? A routine commercial shipment of lithium-ion batteries for 2-way radios. For a cover-up this size to hold, hundreds of people across at least 4 different governments would need to stay silent for over a decade, while real, physically verifiable ocean debris kept washing up on real beaches the entire time. The simpler explanation is almost always the true one. Chapter 5. What Netflix got wrong. Step back from the individual theories, and a pattern in the documentary itself becomes the real story. One critic wrote that the shoot-down theory gets minutes of dramatic build-up before an expert is finally allowed to, in his words, shrug it off as more loopy than legitimate. Bordering, he wrote, on the irresponsible. Another reviewer called it the sin of pretending every theory deserves equal time and equal weight, with Jeff Wise functioning as the series' primary guide across 2 entire episodes. One piece of amateur satellite imagery, crowdsourced from volunteers online, is given real on-camera credibility, implying it was suppressed by governments. Critics who've actually studied it call it bluntly blurry white blobs. The series also underplays something real. Malaysian authorities sat on radar data for roughly a week, sending the initial search to the wrong ocean entirely. And the sharpest fact check of all is the one we already told you. The documentary's own director has said, on the record, that she believes the plane is most likely in the southern Indian Ocean, the one ending her three-part series spends the least time on. Some of the strongest pushback came from the families themselves, not about the crash, but about this series. Naran Narendran, who lost his wife on this flight, said it should be marketed as fiction, calling it a lavish exercise in gaslighting. The backlash reached governments too. Vietnam pulled episode 1 from its own platform entirely, objecting to claims that it failed to cooperate in the search, a real, dated, institutional response to the show itself. To be fair to the documentary one more time, even its critics praised episode 1's data-driven, minute-by-minute reconstruction of the disappearance itself, calling it disturbingly realistic, right up until, in their words, it collapses into speculation. Chapter 6, the physics. None of that is the most interesting fact check in this entire case. The most interesting one is buried in 8 seconds of automatic satellite data that neither of our previous MH370 videos has walked you through in full. In the final minute, the aircraft's satellite terminal made one unscheduled attempt to log back onto the network. 8 seconds later, it tried again and then went silent forever. That is not a coincidence, and it is not a person. When an aircraft's engines flame out from fuel exhaustion, a backup generator automatically starts and briefly repowers the satellite link. Just long enough to force one last, involuntary attempt to reconnect before that backup runs dry too, minutes later. Analysts measured the tiny frequency shift in those two signals caused by the aircraft's own vertical motion and calculated a descent rate. At the first signal, somewhere around 3,000 to 15,000 feet per minute. 8 seconds later, at the second signal, somewhere between 14,000 and 25,000 feet per minute. A normal passenger jet descends at around 2,000 feet per minute. This aircraft, in its final seconds, was falling 7 to 13 times faster than that and accelerating. The recovered wing flap tells the same story from a different angle. Investigators traced exactly how its rear rivets tore, and the damage only lines up geometrically if that flap was retracted, the setting for ordinary cruising flight, not for a landing. One ATSB investigator put the counter-argument plainly. If someone still had control and still had fuel, there was never a reason to run the tanks dry, then attempt an unpowered glide when a powered landing had been available the whole time. And no large, intact piece of this aircraft has ever been recovered. Only small, fragmented pieces, consistent with a fast, high-energy impact. Not a gentle water landing, which tends to leave much larger sections floating. Put all 4 of those together, the accelerating dive, the retracted flap, the fuel logic, the shattered debris, the official investigation's own physics all point the same direction. In its final minutes, nobody appears to have been flying this aircraft. It is not unanimous. Larry Vance, a career air crash investigator, looked at the same flat photographs and reached the opposite conclusion. Extended, not retracted, meaning someone was flying it, carefully, all the way to a controlled water landing. ATSB officials responded to him directly and publicly, standing by their own retracted flap finding. When a career investigator and the agency that ran the actual search disagree this specifically, naming the disagreement honestly matters. But the official finding gets the last word here. A separate, peer-reviewed paper argues the standard math might be using the wrong model, that coupling the plane's heading changes with the signal, instead of treating the shift as purely vertical, is consistent with a gentler, more controlled ending. It's real science. It hasn't replaced the model the actual search was built on. One more small detail, easy to miss. At 2:25 that morning, the satellite unit rebooted mid-flight, rare enough that some technical analysts read it as a specific interruption of one particular electrical bus. A detail that takes real, specific knowledge of the aircraft's own systems to even locate. Chapter 7, where it stands now. While the documentary argued theories on a screen, a real ship kept searching a real ocean. Ocean Infinity's newest search ran in 2 phases, weeks in the spring of last year, then again from the very end of December into January, over 5 months at sea combined. It found nothing. Malaysia's $70 million reward remains unpaid. The company's own chief executive says their commitment has not ended and that they hope to return when circumstances allow. That specific search box traces back to a contested method, analysing faint disturbances in worldwide amateur radio signals. It sits entirely outside the toolkit official investigators actually use. And yet, it is the real reasoning that sent a real, government-funded ship to that exact patch of ocean. Less than half of that predicted area was actually covered before the ship had to leave. The hypothesis was never disproven there. It was simply never fully checked. This year, Malaysia's government approved another 12 months, running through next June, to finish covering what's left. Its transport minister called the extension, in his words, a manifestation of the government's continuous and unwavering commitment to provide closure for the families. There's one more real lead. Scientists re-examined recordings from underwater microphones built to detect nuclear tests and found one faint signal at one station, bearing roughly toward the search zone. It has not been picked up by a second station, and the exact bearing is disputed. Call it exactly what it is: a real, exciting lead, not a location. Debris keeps surfacing too. Just last December, searcher Blaine Gibson found another piece on a beach in Madagascar, which he says supports a mid-air breakup and argues against a slow, controlled landing. That is his own read of the evidence, not yet a confirmed official finding. And Jeff Wise, the same man behind 2 of this documentary's headline theories, published yet another new idea in February this year. This time, that the search's continued failure implies someone survived the dive and glided the aircraft further than anyone has searched. He named the captain specifically, while admitting, in his own words, it's hard to imagine why anyone would have wanted to do that. 3 theories from the same man in 3 years about the same 11 minutes of data. That alone should tell you something about how much of this case is still genuinely unsettled and how little of the certainty in that documentary actually holds up. Chapter 8, The Verdict. So the documentary's own harshest independent critic gets the final word on the show itself. In his assessment, it hands conspiracy, fabrication, and fantasy the same weight as hard evidence, and every one of its 3 headline theories is ruled out by the physical evidence that actually exists. And the official investigation gets the final word on the case itself, exactly as it did the day it was published. Unable to determine the real cause, third-party interference not ruled out, no conclusive finding against any individual. Every theory in this video, and every theory in that documentary, sits on top of that same unresolved foundation. Nothing since has changed it. We didn't make this video to defend a documentary or to tear one down for clicks. We made it because 12 years on, this mystery is still being sold as certainty in half a dozen contradictory directions at once, and 239 families still don't have the one thing that would actually end it: the aircraft. Until someone finds it, every theory, ours included, is still just a theory. If this made you want the full minute-by-minute story of how an investigation like this actually works, from the black box math to the ocean floor, we have another one on this channel. Air France 447, the flight we did pull from the ocean. It took 2 years to find, and what its recorder actually captured is just as disturbing as anything in this documentary. If Air France 447's 2-year search shocked you, wait until you see what its own black box actually recorded. Subscribe to Black Box Breakdown. We take the world's biggest aviation mysteries apart, piece by piece, and when the honest answer is that nobody knows yet, we tell you that too.
If this one got under your skin a little, good. That's the point. And it only keeps happening because people like you keep showing up.
So do one thing for me. Hit subscribe. It is free, and it is the whole reason Black Box can keep taking these disasters apart.